I did a previous iceberg on the dark digital identity disorder, on a digital identity, and I got some pretty good success with it. And so I decided I need to do another iceberg. I've really been wanting to do another iceberg. And one of the things that I received a lot of comments on that video, some really long comments. I think that it would be interesting just to read some of those comments someday, but I thought I needed to do another iceberg. And so here we are with another iceberg. And if you're not familiar with icebergs because you haven't been on the internet or whatever, then I'll quickly go over that really quickly. It's where you do a deep dive on a particular subject. You start out here on the top with very common, well-known things like Occam's razor. A lot of everybody's heard of that particular razor. And yes, this iceberg is on philosophical razors today. So a lot of people have heard of Occam's razor, but not very many people have heard of Adler's razor, or the discomfort, or the narcissist razor. So we're going to talk about all of those, and we're going to go even deeper. I've been studying for a while, and my plan is to try to make it to 100 levels deep. That's 100 new philosophical razors for you to take every story, conspiracy theory, belief, and give it the death by 1,000 cuts, so that you can get down to the bone of the truth. You can find out what the real truth is to everything. So that's what we're here to do today, is to exercise our critical thinking. And notice I also got a microphone this time. That was something about people commented before. So I'm curious to see what you think it sounds like. This time we are going to exercise our critical thinking, become better critical thinkers, because that is definitely needed today. So here we go. I did still want to talk about icebergs a little bit, because up here on the top, we're in the common consciousness where everybody hangs out. But when you go down below, you're into this unconscious, always going underwater in mythical things. That symbolizes the unconscious. And when we're talking about icebergs, we're going into the collective unconscious. These deep dives, we're going into the collective unconscious. We're channeling from there, but we're also going into things that we haven't heard about, but they're still in our subconscious. So the first place we pulled from these razors, just to make everything very common and to stay at the top, is we're going to go to good old Wikipedia, and we're going to look through their razors together while we talk about it and discuss that a little bit. In philosophy, a razor is a principle or rule of thumb that allows one to eliminate, shave off unlikely explanations for a phenomenon or unnecessary actions. Common examples include, and it starts out here with Adler's razor because it is in alphabetical order, but for the sake of a iceberg, I think that we need to start out with Occam's razor. And right here it says Occam's razor explains that requiring fewer unjustified assumptions are more likely to be correct. Avoid unnecessary, inappropriate assumptions. Wow, that's a complicated way of saying it, Wikipedia. But simplest explanation is probably true. That is where Occam's razor is going. If we haven't heard of it, if you don't know about it, it is the everyday carry pocket knife of razors. But more people use it like a cleaver when they whip it out and chop it down, saying it is the most simplest exclamation. When you hear hoof beats, it's got to be horses. And if somebody has a headache, it's not a brain tumor, it's dehydration. Speaking of which, got some oolong tea here from Trader Joe's, so we're trying something. Here's another one of my favorites, Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Now this one's one of my favorites, because if you're a manager or in a relationship or whatever, you got a friend who's doing something that annoys you, it is easier to just quickly judge it and say that it is due to incompetence or stupidity or something like that, than to immediately say that they are purposely trying to piss you off. And I think this is a great one, something that we should always utilize in life. You can see right below it is Hitchens razor, made by Hitchen, who's one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Another video for another day. One of the 4 atheist horsemen of the apocalypse. But he said that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So simply, if you can't prove it, if there's no evidence for it, then why are we arguing about it? And then right underneath it, this one's interesting, and it's not one that we have a lot of experience with. It's maybe one that you could kind of start to get down to the bottom of the surface with, and that's Hume's guillotine, because it's not even a razor. What ought to be cannot be deduced from what is. Perspective claims cannot be derived solely from descriptive claims and must be dependent on other prescriptions. If the cause assigned for any effect be not significant to produce, we must either reject it or add to it such qualities as will give it just proportion to the effect. Wow. I can definitely tell I wasn't really ready for this. These razors, philosophical razors. But we're going to keep on going. Maybe someday when I am ready for it, I'll make a better video, but I'm not going to give up right now. And I hope you're sticking with me, because you are going to learn something nonetheless. Even if I am not completely ready for this, we are going to show you some new razors. And so stick with me. We got Adler's razor here, known as Newton's flaming laser sword. I love this because it's got that little bit of fantasy and techno. It's a techno razor. It's techno-philosophy, because we are definitely into the age of techno-philosophy, where AI is going to whip out its flaming laser sword. And if something can not be settled by an experiment or observation, then it is not worthy of debate. And this still seems like something old. It doesn't seem like something super technical, but that is Adler's razor. And then we have Gracie's razor. Grace's razor. Grace? All right. Sure, I'm going to get some comments, and I hope I get some comments, because I need some comments about how I am screwing this all up. But as a principle of parsimony, conversationally implicates are to prefer over cinematic content for linguistic explanations. I'm going to need to watch some videos on that one. Let's move on. You can see I'm incompetent of some of these, and I'm going to have to associate this not to malice. There's Sagan's standard, which this is another one of my favorites because of Carl Sagan. He's one of my heroes, one of my idols, one of my people I've followed for a long time. And if you haven't heard The Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan, then you should chase that down. Stop watching this video and go watch that, because it's a hell of a lot better, and it's better for your philosophy. But if you had, let's keep on going, and let's talk about Sagan's standard. Positive claims require positive evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This has been shaved down to the bottom part. Mainly, a lot of people just specifically say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Therefore, something as extraordinary as claiming we were designed by something intelligent, something like a god, some supreme being that's all-loving, all-knowing, and all-powerful, requires some extraordinary evidence. Every one of those statements is extraordinary. That being is intelligent alone is extraordinary, and that all by itself requires some extraordinary evidence. And then we could work all the way down to the rest of the things as it being all-knowing, all-loving, and all-powerful. Every one of those requires extraordinary evidence. And when you look at the fact that we are all just people, all just little life forms that live in one. Talking about Sagan's standard, how we are all just human beings, just individual beings on spaceship Earth, on this tiny biological ship floating in outer space at tens of thousands of miles an hour, possibly hundreds of thousands of miles an hour. In some aspect or another, I do know that we're traveling around the sun at a certain speed, and the sun is traveling around that giant black hole in the center of our galaxy at a certain speed, and then our galaxy is traveling around the giant black hole in the center. Our solar system is traveling around the giant black hole in the center of our galaxy, and then our galaxy, I don't know if it's moving or not. I think it is, because it's about to collide with another one in a few billion years. So we are these people. We are individualized beings on this tiny blue speck, floating through the universe, paying taxes, wasting our blip, our 80 years of a blip between two eternities, if we don't get any more. If you've done the math on that, on your 80 years, if you take 365 and you divide it, or you multiply it times 80, you get about 30,000 days. For someone who's young, if you say that, it might sound like a lot, but for someone who's getting into their 30s, 40s, or 50s, and you work it out again, and it gets down to the number of like 10,000, when it gets down to like the number of 10,000 days, and you realize that you're spending your day by day on this speck in the middle of the universe, paying taxes, selling your soul for the no work-life balance, so you can continue to do the same thing every day for your 9-to-5 grind, over and over again. You get up in the morning and you go to work. When you realize these things, that you're on this tiny speck, and we're doing this so we can pay taxes, that we're being controlled by governments, and that this tiny speck is divided into these little lines, these borders, and you look at the birds, and you look at how they can just cross the borders without anybody caring. How flocks of geese can migrate from one border to another. Nobody cares. Well, maybe somebody cares, but they're not going to get deported. Or how the crows, if they chose to, they could fly through one border to another. Sagan's standard. Positive claims require positive evidence, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Moving on. So, we've gotten all the way through these very common 8 here in Wikipedia. And now we are moving on. There's 9 philosophical razors there, but here the mind collection is going to give us a few more in the 11 philosophical razors to simplify your life. So in here we can see we've already gone through Gracie's, and it's going to be better explained here, so I might not take some time to paraphrase this at least. Here we go. So imagine you're at home and the doorbell rings. You call your partner, who's somewhere in the house. Can you get the door, please? The reply comes, I'm in the shower. Being a normalish couple, you go to the door yourself. Not so normal couple might react differently by getting into a heated argument. And now you're supposed to get the door as if it's bolted to the house. And why personal shower habits are completely irrelevant to the task. Linguists, the people who study the language and its structure, distinguish being semantics and... Wow, this is a deep one. And I'm going to need some comments. I'm doing this so I can learn. I'm doing this so that I can get better at deductive reasoning. And I want to give all the credit here to themindcollection.com, and hope you'll go through and read all of theirs and click on their advertisements or something. Let's move on. Actually, let's go back to the Mind Collection because we probably forgot some there. All right, and this is an iceberg, and we're supposed to... Here's Feynman's razor. One we haven't talked about, and this is why we're digging deeper here. If you can't explain it... So see, this is what I need for this. I shouldn't be doing this, I guess. I don't really understand this, but here it is. If you can't explain something simply, then you don't really understand it. I've heard this better said. If you can't explain something to a child, like a 5-year-old or a 5th grader, then you don't really understand it. And it is obvious that I don't really understand philosophical razors, that I don't understand most of these. So I know that I don't really understand it, which is why I'm making this video and why I'm here doing this with you. So there's that one. Feynman's razor, which I'm probably not even pronouncing right, is another one of my favorites. I'm going to put it right up there with Hanlon's razor, because I think it's something really important that we all take our time to understand something to where the level that we can understand it and explain it to a child. Let's move on. We got Occam's, we've already done Hanlon's. Riker's razor. I hope this is William Riker's from Star Trek, but we'll find out. If someone's incompetence is too staggering to be true, they're most likely faking it, and you should find out why. Wow. I don't know if this came from William Riker or not. It did right here. 6. William Riker, in the term, the principle based on an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. All right, this is my new favorite because I'm a big-time Trekkie, and I'm wondering why we don't have the universe that Star Trek has promised us yet. That's another video I would like to do. But right here, my new razor, and I'm glad I went on this iceberg and found out Riker's razor, because this is phenomenal. And it explains the whole episode right here. Like I said, again, I want to give all the credit to the Mind Collection, and you should jump on here and read it, because I'm not going to read anymore, or ruin this for you, or spoil it for you, because I want you to come on here and find out Riker's razor for yourself. I don't know if this guy who wrote the Mind Collection did it, or if they found it, they discovered it, just talked about it. Here we got Jung's razor, the famous Carl Jung, another one of my favorite. My favorite psychologist, psychiatrist, my favorite authors, everything. You got to read the Red Book, which is another thing that I am not anywhere near to the level of explaining, like in Feynman's razor. But you've got everything that Carl Jung about the collective conscious. We talked about that at the beginning of this video. How the top of the iceberg is everything that's above, but the below, when you dive underwater, you are symbolizing the unconscious. And so let's read about Jung's razor for a little bit. If you cannot understand why someone did something, look at the consequences and their inner motivation. This is another pretty phenomenal one. And what I'm trying to do here in this video is just introduce you to all of these razors so that you can dive deeper. I think that I need to make a video on every one of these razors on my, independently. And again, I would have to study them so much more. Because there's not, when I made this video, I made it and I didn't really even see anybody else had done an iceberg on philosophical razors. And I haven't seen a lot of videos on all of these individual razors. Everybody's done the common ones, like those first 8 that were on the Wikipedia page, but we're already underneath the line, and we haven't even gotten to like 25 or 20. So here we are, and we're going deeper. Now we got Chatton's razor. If 3 things are not enough to verify an affirmative position about things, a 4th must be added, and so on. I thought it would end there. I thought it would just end at if 3 things are not enough to verify an affirmative position, then it's not verifiable. But nope, it moves on. We got to go to 4, and if 4's not enough, then we got to go to 5 and 6. And when do we stop? When does this razor sharp enough to stop this affirmative position, which is an interesting choice of words here, because it reminds you of other things like affirmative action or something like that. And I wonder, this one definitely deserves a lot of investigation, because it sounds feasible and usable, but it also just definitely makes you wonder, more about this, who is Chattington? Who is Chattons? Chattons? It's definitely got to be Chattons. And it's an anti-razor. So maybe that's why it's so in-depth, because it's an anti-razor. And then there's some closing thoughts. And again, please come back and read the Mind Collection. I don't want to take anything from them, but I do definitely thank them for adding to our list here. And we're going to dive deeper, and we are not going to be able to define things just from here, just from what we're Googling here. Well, let's dive deeper into this collection of razors. Okay, so now we have 25 philosophical razors. Let's go to this list by Slow. This website called Slow. Again, giving all the due credits to Slow here. 25 philosophical razors to shave off bad thinking. We got the cheat sheet here. Okay, so we're going to just blow this up here. We've already done Occam's. We've already done Hanlon's. So we're going to zoom on down to here. Einstein. First thing here we got is Einstein's. Make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. And then we've already done Feynman's. So here's Gellman's. This is interesting. I think that Gellman's razor is very interesting because it kind of reminds me of like Gillette. I don't know if you like, I can date myself by going back to that old Gillette commercial. Gillette, the best a man can get, and then we got Gellman's razor. Assume every media article contains a percentage of false information. Wow, that's a good one for the Times right now. Popper's razor. For a theory to be scientific, it must be falsifiable. Simply said, if you can't prove it wrong, then it can't be scientific. If I tell you that I have a girlfriend, but then every time you ask to see her, I tell you, well, she lives in another state or she goes to a different school, and I never actually bring her into the picture, then as far as you're concerned, it's not scientifically provable. Until I bring out this person, it doesn't exist. And that's where Popper's razor comes into effect. I think that Sagan, so you can see right here, Sagan's standard right underneath this, that we've already talked about Sagan's standard. But Sagan would say, he had this great speech about having an invisible dragon in your garage. And then he would say that we would need to go out there, and if it's invisible, then all we got to do is sprinkle some flour on the floor and watch the dragon's footprints appear in the flour. And then you can at least prove that there is something in there. Whether or not he's in a dragon, you can prove that there's an invisible sign. But then you would say, oh, but he's floating and he doesn't leave any footprints. And so the next thing we got to do is throw the powder in the air and see that the powder forms around this dragon. And then you can continue to say that the dragon, well, the powder just goes through him. And every step we go on to talk about how this dragon is not falsifiable is another step that we take Popper's razor and shaving out the truth and proving that this dragon is not falsifiable, so he is not scientifically feasible. He doesn't exist. Let's continue on. Russell's teapot is another one of my famous ones. Again, not really a razor. It's more of a teapot, but definitely something here that needs to be in here. The philosophical burden of proof lies on the person making an empirical, unjustifiable claims rather than shifting the burden of others to disprove said verifiable claim. So when we're talking here about Russell's teapot, and we say something like, if somebody comes out and says that God exists or that there is a God, it is that person's duty to prove that God exists. Russell's teapot came from Russell making the claim that a teapot is floating out there in space. It's kind of similar to the giant spaghetti monster. If there's a teapot floating somewhere in our solar system, it is the duty of the person making that claim to prove that it exists, not the person who you are making the claim to prove that it doesn't exist. So now we are onto the Naval's razor. Moving deeper into this, underneath the surface here, we are now pretty far under the surface of the razor. We've already talked about the 8 that were on the Wikipedia page, and then we learned 2 more we learned 3 more, 2 more from the other page that had 11 on it. And now we're down deep into Naval's razor. We are 16 razors deep into this iceberg. Count out all of the 8 in the Wikipedia page and those common philosophical razors. Then we are at least another 8 razors below the surface now. Being 8 razors below the surface to Naval's razor, how appropriate, one that is nautically, or maybe that's about, either we're navel gazing or we're naval like the Navy. So we can be nautically termed here. The Naval's razor. The Naval's razor. If you can't decide between 2 choices, take the path that is more difficult, painful in the short term. Now, so if you got take the path least traveled. Do the thing that's harder. Don't follow the path of least resistance. This one here is about causing growth. And I guess then when it came to making this Philosophical Razors Iceberg, the path that would have been easier and less painful for me, and maybe for all of us, is for me not to make this. I don't know. Yeah, here we are. Let's move on. The discomfort razor. It's almost the same as the razor above it. The discomfort razor is almost the same as the nasal's razor. The more uncomfortable the activity, the more likely it will lead to growth. The more comfortable the activity, the less likely, or the more uncomfortable the activity, the more likely it will lead to growth. The more comfortable the activity, the more likely it will lead to stagnation. So it takes discomfort to make us grow. It takes rubbing a razor against the stone to make it sharper. And again, like you can see how this goes with the Naval's razor. Moving on to Tarswell's razor. The more emotional you feel, the less you should trust your judgment. Yeah, the more passionate you are about something, the more biased you may be about that subject. It's definitely one worth looking into, especially in the times now. Which brings me to something here about my own razor. And when I was going through these razor, I started talking to one of my friends, and at the time when I was looking through these razors, there was another person in my group who is kind of an interesting old guy, but he made the comment. He brought in these rocks, and he said that if you put these rocks in your car, they'll make it so you won't get in car accidents. So he brought these little rocks. They weren't crystals. They were like, and he said, if you put these in your car, it'll make it so that you won't get into car accidents. It will protect you from getting into car accidents. He was also saying how he had these crystals which he could put into certain churches to keep them so that they would be invisible to mass shooters. And he's making claims like this that are completely unfalsifiable. Well, I guess they're not unfalsifiable, because if that car got into an accident, immediately it would be falsified. But he's making these extraordinary claims like this, and it made me come up with another razor. And that one said that if you make a crazy belief that does not stand up to the other razors, that therefore everything you said after that must come under scrutiny. If you believe the cult leader, then everything you say after that must come under scrutiny. And I think it goes farther with that. So we have the first level of just like if you make an extraordinary claim, like these rocks will keep you from getting into car accidents, or something like that, then we have to take it a step farther, and we have to bring it under more scrutiny. But then we go farther, like if you believe the cult leader about the rapture is going to come, and then the rapture doesn't come, and you double down. So we have the double down razor. It's almost like one of those double-bladed razors. You know, you got the triple razors and the 5-bladed razors. If you follow the cult leader, if the cult leader says the rapture is taking place, if the cult leader says that we're going to make something better, and then it doesn't become better, then you have to come even more scrutiny. So the first one is believing or making these extraordinary claims or believing the cult leader. The next one is doubling down. And then maybe we can go to steps farther and doubling down farther and farther to where we have a razor with 5 blades. But that's just being metaphorical about the razors and kind of like a pun. But we are at the level where if you make an extraordinary claim, that everything you say after that has to be put under more scrutiny. The bragging razor. If someone brags about their success or happiness, assume it's half what they claim. If someone downplays their success or happiness, assume it's double what they claim. That's a fascinating one, and I think it goes back to the one I was just talking about you following the cult leader. But here we go. I guess it's like, the one that got away, the fish that got away, or something like that. It's an interesting one. We're going to move on because we're just about naming off razors and getting you farther in to just have more things. It says right here that we're 17 deep, and I think that's about right. We're 17 or 18 or somewhere in there. We've got the narcissism razor. If you're worried about what people think about you, remember they're too worried about what other people think about them to think much about you. And that's what got me at least to make this video, is I had to stop giving I had to stop caring what people think, so I could make this video. And so here we are. Moving on down, charisma razor. If a high-achieving person is charismatic, start with a level of skepticism for each idea they present. If a high-achieving person isn't charismatic, start with a level of openness for each idea they present. So that one I think is really cool, and it brings a lot out there for the politicians. Every time a politician makes a claim, then we've got to start with a higher level of skepticism for every claim they make. Moving on, luck razor, 19 deep here. We are going farther underneath the water. Luck razor, if struck with two equal options, pick the one that feels like it will produce the most luck later on down the line. So we're picking ones that make us lucky. I think it's an interesting razor. Each one of these razors, I want to do a video on each razor individually and really dive deep into it. Everyday razor. If you go from doing a task weekly to daily, you achieve 7 years of output in 1 year. If you apply 1% of compound interest each time, you achieve 54 years of output in 1 year. I'm not sure if you're just spreading yourself too thin or if this has something. I'm trying to make a video every day, and I'm trying to make many videos every day, and we'll see how that affects us. Right here in this, we're just, again, like I said, I'm just trying to introduce you to more and more razors. Going farther into the philosophical razors, we got the network razor. If you have two quality people that would benefit from an intro to one another, always do it. So if you got two people that would benefit from being introduced to each other, then introduce them to each other. I wonder if these are philosophical razors and just matters of life, but we're continuing on. Smart friends razor, 22 deep now. If an unsure about a small bet, but your smart friends are sure, take the bet. If you wait for the rest of society to confirm it, you'll be too late. Early late razor. If it's taking point on Reddit or Twitter, you might be early. If it's taking point on LinkedIn or Facebook, you are definitely late. Might be hard to call these philosophical razors when we've worked into them being social media razors, but I think that they definitely still have validity in being known. So here we have the Instagram razor. When you see a photo of an influencer looking attractive on Instagram, assume there are 99 worse photos that you haven't seen of them, and they've just picked the best one. I think that goes for all social media. Assume you are seeing the best face of people on social media, which is interesting because I have a friend on Facebook who usually puts a pretty bad face out there. They usually come onto Facebook and just say how sad and how upset they are. And I think that there are many people, I think this works particularly well for Instagram and probably less well on stuff like Reddit and 4chan, because people will put like pretty bad faces on Reddit and 4chan. But and sometimes people will get out and beg on I want to call it begging. People will express their loneliness on Facebook. But if there's somebody expressing their loneliness on Instagram, that might be interesting. That might be pretty fascinating to find somebody who talks about how bad their life is on Instagram, or who talks about a bad experience on Instagram. Because people, there's a subreddit for "Am I the asshole?" or things like that on Reddit. But I wonder if there are people who do that on Instagram, and how fascinating we could take a dive like that into. That goes back to my dark digital identity disorder iceberg, my digital identity iceberg, and I could have divided it into your identity on Instagram, or your identity on Facebook, or your identity on Reddit, all being different identities, and for the way that you're letting being known on there. And we have the 25th razor here, 25 plus razor. If you are 25 plus, assume your reactions to the technologies and trends are wrong. If someone under the age of 25 is obsessed with something new, don't dismiss it until you've done 10 plus hours on it. Pretty fascinating one there, and I think it definitely has some validity with new technology, like AI. It's interesting to see the way people think about AI. And I've actually met a lot of young people under 25 who have a pretty harsh opinion of AI, but it seems like the 40 and over, but me being almost 50, I am all in on AI, and I'm very optimistic about it. And I've done some videos about it, and I'm going to do more, but that's another video for another day. So we're 25 deep here, and we're going to find more to deepen this iceberg, to go darker and deeper on the iceberg about the philosophical razor. Now that we're 25 deep, let's see what else we can find. See if we can find some more razors that you don't know about for this iceberg. If you've stayed with me this long, and you've gotten this far, and you've gotten this deep in the Philosophical Razors Iceberg, I want to extend my gratitude to you. And I'm going to reward you here with this. So I actually, when I restarted this project, because I started it a while ago, when I restarted this project, I thought I actually had 100 razors. And I don't want to disappoint you, because I didn't get 100 actual razors, but I did find this. This is what I'd found when I started this project before, is mental models. The best way to make intelligent decisions, 100 mental models explained. And I would like to do a video again on each one of these, if that does not dive too deep into anything here, because I don't want to copyright. I don't want to violate anybody's creation. In this iceberg video, we're going to just touch on what each of these pages have here to offer. One of these mental models pages here. We're going to just dive into this blog right here, because I hope that you'll come here and give this website all of its credit. So we're just going to quickly scroll down. We can see that these are mental models here, and they're different ways of thinking. If we do scroll down a little ways here, we'll find Occam's razor right there, and even Hanlon's razor. So this is based on the philosophical razors. But next we have relativity. And if we go back up here to the top, we've got, it goes through in general thinking tools. The map is not the territory. Circle of competence. First principles theory. Second order thinking. And it goes on. So if you want to get, again, when we started this whole video, we talked about how we were putting any conspiracy to death by 1,000 cuts. And this is just another, these are just more tools. Reciprocity in your toolbox, thermodynamics, to utilize to make sure that whatever you're testing is true. That you've gotten to the utmost of epistemology here. So I'm giving you here these, and we're going to touch on some of them. And since we're going to the iceberg, let's go all the way to the bottom. And you can just go through this piece by piece, but we're going deep on that iceberg. Tendency to want to do something. Flight, fight, intervention, demonstration of values, etc. We might term this boredom syndrome. Most humans have a tendency to need to act, even when their actions are not needed. We also tend to offer solutions, even when we do not have knowledge of the problem. There you go. That's a really good one. That's a really good razor right there that we're finding all the way on the bottom here. And it's interesting that the bottom of these hundreds is at 22, so I'm not sure about that. Maybe they're not giving you everything here. But that right there is golden. That's if there is one that good right here, the fact that right there we're saying we do not have knowledge to solve a problem. We tend to offer solutions even when we don't have knowledge. People do that all the time. People are so afraid to say, I don't know. When you ask if God exists, it is okay to say, I don't know. When you ask if hell exists, it's okay to say, I don't know. When you're asked if it's okay for a person to have multiple identities, by that I mean you can't decide what role you want to fulfill in society, and I'm not just talking about gender here. I'm talking about it's hard to decide where you want to be in society, what job you want to hold. It's okay to say, I don't know. Let's look at a few more here. Survivorship bias. I'm going to leave some of these because again, I want people to come here and read, come here to these websites. I want you to expand your knowledge, not by looking at what I've said, but I'm just trying to tease you out there to go explore some more stuff. Tendency to overestimate consistency of behavior. Fundamental attribution error. We tend to ascribe the behavior of others to their innate traits rather than to situational factors, leading us to overestimate how consistent that behavior will be in the future. In such situation, predicting behavior seems not very difficult. Of course, in practice, the assumption is consistently demonstrated to be wrong, and we are consistently surprised when others do not act accordingly. The innate traits we've endowed them with. Spectacular. Come read this stuff. Come deepen your level, your power of thinking and your critical thinking, because that's what everybody needs right now. Let's back out and let's go to this other one. I want to see if it's the same. This wisdom theory article right here. 100 mental models. And I wonder if this will take us all the way past the 25, like the other one didn't, or if they're going to sell us something, which they may have every right to do, because they're certainly offering some valuable stuff. Yeah, this is like a book, and I guess I'm going to have to read this book. Yeah, they're really marketing this heavy on here, but if it's anywhere as good as some of this stuff, then I think it might be worth it. I don't work for these people. I can't even click here. I got to click I want this. 10,000 copies sold. Well, the other thing I want to know, if it's on Audible. Since we're here, we're going to check it out on Audible. And maybe I'll be listening to it and giving you a deeper thought on this later. I have been really wanting to do some book reviews on this on my channels. 100 mental models, mind hacking, mental health, cure anxiety in relationships, and conquer depression via cognitive therapy. I don't know if that's the same book or not, but it still sounds pretty good. It's awfully cheap. Well, for $5, that probably one's worth the gamble. I don't see that other one. Okay, here's this one. I hate these dark psychology ones. I've read a few of these other dark psychology ones, and I just couldn't get into them. They were kind of boring. And again, when you see a book being this cheap, it makes you, and this one's only 37 minutes. How can you get through 100 mental models in 37 minutes? But again, I guess the gamble of 276 and 37 minutes worth of your time might be worth it to find out what this book has to offer. What else we got? All right, well, 100 tricks to appear smart in meetings. So I guess I don't see this other book. I'm going to have to call this meeting adjourned here. We didn't get through 100 philosophical razors, but I hope you learned something, and I hope if this video helped you that you'll like it and share it, and please comment. I really want to start a discussion here. I'm pretty fascinated to see where this goes.